All right, good to watch everybody. For all the night people, this is like the normal time to learn, Mustama. Okay. All right. With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN Daf Lamed Beis. We left off beginning the sugya, Machloikis Rav Nachman and Absheshes, after the Gemara stated the fact that Chazaka, Shliach Oisa Shlichusai, we have the Shita of Rav Nachman, which is mamish the last line on Daf Lamed Aleph Amid Beis, that B'Shel Torah, Ein Chazaka Shliach Oisa Shlichusai, since it is a Torah inyan, we have to actually know whatever knowing means, but we cannot rely on a presumption. Rav Nachman says, yeah, by Derabanan, B'Shel Seifrim, yes, Chazaka Shliach Oisa Shlichusai, but not B'Shel Torah. And Absheshes does not differentiate. So we're going to start on Daf Lamed Beis. Absheshes is going to be trying to prove that his shita is correct, that it makes no difference. And even B'Shel Torah, yes, we say Chazaka Shliach Oisa Shlichusei. We will also bring down a very interesting whole work in Abraisa about one who is gifting figs to his fellow, but the fellow, the recipient of the gift, is the one picking the figs off the tree. And which means we know for sure that the donor could not have tithed it before he gave it, because you cannot tithe it when it's on the tree. Furthermore, because of the general ideal of not separating trumas or maisres, shaloim and hamukov. Shaloim and hamukov means when the items from which you are separating are not together. In other words, really, theoretically, even though I have produce in one room and I have produce in another location, I can declare that the produce in location A, some of that should be the trumas umaisras for that which we have in location B. As long as they are of the same quality, it might work. It's definitely not ideal to do so, because it could be that you think you have produce in location A, but it's no longer there. Someone stole it, someone ate it. So therefore, what your action is, nothing is nonsensical, and therefore the produce here in location B remains tevel. So certainly a chaver should try not to do that. It's not ideal. However, there's another side to this coin, and ultimately we're going to have a very interesting topic. And quoting the words of Rebbe, that nichalei lechaver, it's better for someone who is God-fearing, deliyavet hu isura kalila, for him to be violating, so to say, a light prohibition, rather v'loy li'avei dam ha'aretz isura rabo. In other words, the concept of going on mesiras nefesh, real mesiras nefesh, which is giving up your ruchnias. So another yid should not do a greater violation, is really a machloikes tanoim. No one is saying that a person should violate a sin, but this is a great example. Separating trumas and maisers, as we just explained, shaloim min amukov is not ideal. It's called B'Lashon Chazal a Isura Kalila, Psashvache Isir. And Rebbe holds that it's better for one to violate an Isura Kalila if that will guarantee that our fellow Jew will not violate a Isura Rabba. Now, on Daf Lamed Beis Amud Beis, we're going to begin a new Mishnah. The Mishnah is speaking about placing an eruv on a tree or in a pit. The nakuda of the sugya that we will begin on Daf Lamed Beis Amud Beis, and it's going to go for 2 dafim. I know that the following 2 dafim are the kamus small, but the echus, they're huge, is based on the following concept. That when you place an eruv, as we mentioned, whether the eruv needs to be placed at the end of the previous day, in the beginning of Bein Hashmoshes, at the end of Bein Hashmoshes, let's just speak about Bein Hashmoshes. The eruv has to be in its proper location during Bein Hashmoshes, and it has to be accessible for the person for whom the eruv was placed. Accessible means 2 things: begashmias and halachically. Begashmias, that sugya we're going to start later on Daf Lamed Daled Amud Beis. So if I place an eruv, let's say in a closet, and the closet has a key and a lock, a door with a lock, and it was locked before Bein Hashmoshes, and you lost the key, that will be the Mishnah later. Question is, the person was unable to retrieve it physically because he didn't have the key. We're going to begin the sugya not addressing the inaccessibility due to physical challenges. We're going to speak about the inaccessibility due to halachic challenges. And really, we're going to have an opportunity not only to review the malacha that was spoken about the most in Masechta Shabbos, which is the malacha of Haitzah, where we're going to have various nuances regarding Eruv Tachumin as it is meshadach itself with Yisurei Hana, with Yisurei Haitzah. First of all, we're going to have a sheet of Rebbe that holds that Kol Davar Shu Mishum Shvus Lo Yigazru Olav Bein Hashmashos. I know that we quoted this a few times already. It means that if there's something that's only prohibited rabbinically, Lav Dafka Bein Hashmashos, it goes into effect. I want to say this now. I'll repeat this again, and maybe in the next intro for the next daf or two. This is not the way it sounds. Most of the Rishonim, even according to the Shita, which is Shita Rebbe, that taka, that loy kol davar shum mishum shvus, loy gazru olav bein hashmashos, doesn't mean that there is no shvus bein hashmashos. It does mean either that if there's a tzorech mitzvah, then you are allowed to violate a shvus. For example, amir la'akum. Amir la'akum is permitted bein hashmashos. Not any isur derabanan. Amir la'akum for a mitzvah. Not stam azoi. That's according to some. Furthermore, there are many other Rishonim, I think it's the Ritva, that limits this rule only for Eruv Tchumen. That only for Eruv Tchumen do we say that Kol Davar Shu Mishum Shvus Lo Yigazru Olav Bein Hashmashos, but nevertheless, we're going to go and we're going to chazer this carrying D'Oraisa, this carrying Midrabanan. And if the problem is that my Eruv is inaccessible to me halachically because I may not carry it Midrabanan, that problem will not be taken into account because we will say that I will be allowed to take it ben hashmashos. And furthermore, we're going to conclude Daf Lamed Beis by learning a huge leniency of Rava, who says that wherever you placed your Eruv, which means that the owner who had a shliach place the Eruv there was intending halachically to be koine his shvisa, to acquire his residence in that location to a certain degree becomes like Eruv Shusayachid. I'm saying to a certain degree because it's taka only to a certain degree. But because of that concept, many of the challenges that we will have in understanding a rule in the Mishnah will be resolved based on the principle of Rava. Okay, let us start where we left off. We left off on Daf Lamed Beis, Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the top of the Amid. Again, we have the Machlokes Rav Nachman, Bishal Torah, Ein chazaka shlich chayse shlichusay. Only b'shal seifrim do we say chazaka shlich chayse shlichusay. The Amir Rav Sheshes says echad zeh chazaka shlich chayse shlichusay. And now let's start. Rav Sheshes is attempting to bring a raya that even by isurei by dinei d'oraisa we say chazaka shlich chayse shlichusay. Baruch atah adinoi leinu shakol. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Sheshes. I mean alone. Even by biblical law, yes, Chazaka Shliach Shlichusai Vitnan. We're learning a Mishnah Menachos. Misha Karafa Oimer, as we are familiar with, it is only through Bisman Shabeis Hamikdash Chaim, the offering of the Oimer Karben Mincha Hutara Chodesh, where may one eat the produce, the grains that grew that year, which is prior to the carbon oimer is known as chadash, the new grains, which may not be consumed in d'oraisa. So the moment you brought the carbon, hotera chadash miyad. If they brought it 10 p.m., you can eat it at 10 p.m., 10:01. The moment afterwards, it's not connected to a day. The oimer has to be brought on the second day of Pesach, right? I mean, Machras HaShabbos, the second day after Yom Tov. Shabbos here means the first day of Yom Tov. But it's from when you bring it. Now, what happens if you're not in the Beis HaMikdash? The guys, don't forget that this is Chol HaMoed. And now with technology, when Mashiach will come, we'll know. We'll watch. Mustama, there's going to be a 24/7 that you can watch what's happening in the Beis HaMikdash. But then, when you don't live there, how would you know when they brought it? So the Mishnah says that Harachaykim, people who live far away, they're not there to see it. Mutarim, they are allowed to start eating Chadash, Mechatzois Hayom Ve'elach. End of Mishnah. How do you know that they brought it to my Chatzos? They were allowed to bring it until the end of the day. Says the Gemara of Chadash, the prohibition of eating Chadash is an Isur D'Oraisa, it's B'Shal Torah. Nevertheless, yet, so Lav Mishum, is it not because Chazaka Shliach Oisa Shlichusai? this is the Raya of Rav Sheshes. And right away, Tosfos asks a fundamental question. A shliach, by definition, means someone who he is not obligated to do something. The meshaleach is. It's not his mission, it's the meshaleach's. He is the agent of the meshaleach. When it comes to the chiyuv of offering karbanos, I know that the kohanim are also acting as our shluchim. Whether they are shlucha de Rachmana, we have that in Chazal, whether they are shlucha de done, yeah, they are there is a tzad of the avodah that they are doing because they are our representatives. But independent of that, a kohen is obligated to bring karbanos sibur. So you can argue, ask Tosfos, you know why you can rely for sure that the kohen brought it, not because the shliach does the shlichus, because it's his inyan. Look inside the Tosfos, it's the second one, which is already towards the second half of the Amid. Mikan stam to say that when the Rebbe made it clear that the whole mission of bringing Mashiach, we should not act like his shluchim, as if it's the Rebbe's worry, we are doing his job. No, it has to be my responsibility. And it changes. It's even more than the chazaka shlichos, which is a good question of Tosfos. So Tosfos says Gavaldik. That even though that the chiyuv of a kohen is to bring it on Mimachras HaShabbos, which is until the mincha, until the afternoon. Mitzad dir chiyuv, they don't have to do it by chatzos. The only reason why they're doing it earlier is because they feel that since they are the representatives of the people, and the people cannot eat chadash until they bring it, so they want to fulfill their job for the people of bringing it as soon as they could, earlier than their chiyuv. That's the word that Tosfos says back in the Gemara. That's a great raya. So says the Gemara, but Rav Nachman says there is no proof at all brought from what happened in the Beis Hamikdash. Hassan, the Mishnah itself, guys, in the Beis Hamikdash, there was a Beis Din comprised of Kahanim, but they would oversee the Avodah. They did not allow for there to be any procrastination. That was part of the job of a Beis Din. So says Rav Nachman, Yashir Koyach, in the Beis Hamikdash, when you have people making sure that you do things quicker, sooner rather than later, so then you do it by chatzos. That's not an ayah that if no one is looking over your shoulder, doesn't mean that you're going to do your shlichus. Oh, that this whole Mishnah Menachos was brought about from Rav Nachman against Rav Sheshes. That Rav Nachman, that the Shol Torah ein chazaka shlichus shlichusai, since it says over there Menachos, because the Beis Din will make sure that the Kohanim get their job done sooner than later, is the Haraya Beis Din who do misatzlam boy. But if not for there being this overseeing Beis Din, that l'chayda implies that shliach maybe misatzlam will be lazy. So Rav Sheshes Amalach, no. Beis Din at palga di yoima, but shliach kula yoima. And as you can right away chap, that the answer of Tosfos Bechlal doesn't address this Ikad Amri. Now Tosfos doesn't even bring it. He expects us to figure that out. So let's leave it for the Chachamim to figure it out, because the Gemara and this Ikad Amri is saying that you're right. Palga D'Yom is based on the Beis Din, but that they would for sure do it that day. That's because of Shliach. That's what Rav Sheshes is saying. Really, I don't understand the word. That Rav Sheshes is not bringing this as a proof. All he's saying is that simply, even if it only would have been mitzat shlichus, they also would have done it until the end of the day. That's the pshat over here. Okay. Rav Sheshes, another proof. Another proof, because the first proof was refuted, or Bechlal, it wasn't even his. He needed to faremfer that it should not refute him. Rav Sheshes, that even by biblical mitzvahs, we say shliach will do a shlichus. The Tanya, if a woman is obligated to bring karbanis, either because she gave birth, as we learned, that if a woman gives birth, either she has to bring a sheep, right? A sheep for an oila and a dove for a chatas, or if she cannot afford, she can bring 2 birds. Likewise, a woman who is a zava at the end of the days of zivos, she has to bring 2 bird karbanos. So the din is that she doesn't actually have to witness her birds being offered on the Beis Hamikdash. More than that, she didn't even have to bring the birds themselves. In the Beis Hamikdash era, there were 13 shofros. Shofar doesn't mean a shofar that we blow Rosh Hashanah. Shofros is a name of a certain type of tzedakah box or pushka that was shofar-like. That means that it was wide on the bottom, but it was narrow on the top, so it would be harder for people to stick their hands in and to take money out. And some of those were designated for money from those who are obligated to bring kinim, that are obligated to bring pairs or nests of birds. So she brings the mice and she puts them into the shofar. She doesn't have to see that the Kohanim took those birds out, because really what happens is as long as the Kohanim take those birds, the money out, and they bride the echad lachatas ve'echad la'oila, and they do the avodah the way they should do it, for whomever it belongs to, right, then you're good. So Eloma says the Braisa that all she needs to do is teveles, she needs to go to the mikvah, and she can already eat kachim at night. Why? How do you know that the Kohanim brought it? Now here, by the way, the Kohanim are not mechuyev, this is not a korban sibur. Here the Kohanim are acting as shluchei of the woman. Not just another nuanced detail, that going to the mikvah, guys, whoever has to bring a mechusar kippurim will always have to go to the mikvah biblically on the 7th day. But once you enter the 8th day, all you need to do midoraisa is to bring your kapara. Midrabanan, since you were not allowed to eat kachim until the kapara was brought, even after your kapara was brought, you have to go to the mikvah again. That's the braisa, that she goes to the mikvah and she can eat. And why can she eat? My tama,
Rabbi.
Yes.
Are we just where we're at right now? Are we assuming that any korban yachid would be considered shlichus?
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
For sure. The only counter to that, just we learned this together, is that there's really a machlokes whether kahanim are shluchei derachmana or whether they are shluchei of us. But regardless, they're shluchim. In other words, they're not mechuyev to bring the kinim. It's not a korban sibur that is incumbent upon the community, meaning incumbent upon the kohen. It's a yachid. They're acting as shluchim. Now, l'chayda, that's a good raya. However, but Rav Nachman, Hassan, Kid Rab Shemai, like we just mentioned before, the Amar Rab Shemai, Chazaka, a bezdin, shal kohanim oimdim misham, achi yichlu kol Moshe b'shofar. That was part of what they did. They had a bezdin just for this. They made sure that no money is going to be left on the shofars. If not for that oversight, maybe you would not be allowed to rely on them. Okay, so Amar Rab Sheshes, Vaited. Another this is a fascinating Bryce. Says the Bryce. Reuven tells Shimon, say, go and gather for yourself figs from my fig tree. Now, being that the recipient of the gift was the one that harvested those figs, a couple of things. When Reuven gives a gift to Shimon, especially if Reuven is a chaver, chazaka, he'll never give a gift, produce, if it wasn't properly tithed. Here, we know for sure he didn't tithe it, because how could he tithe it when he gave it for Shimon to gather off the tree? So when Shimon took it off the tree, up until that point, for sure, the owner did not separate Trumas u'Maisos. Another point, you could to chazer these dinim, that even before you have a proper gemar in melacha, in our case, it would probably be re'iyas panei habayis, or however you would define the product is ready, even though midoraisa you can consume it. Midrabanan, you may not consume it in a achilas keva way, but as a nash, what's called achilas ara, you can partake of. So the Braisa says, oichel mehen aroi. A casual nashing he can do right away. However, if he wants to have a proper meal, umaasron vadai. If he wants to have a proper meal on it, even if it's not yet a gemar malacha midrabanan, you have to take of trumas u'maisos. We don't say, well, maybe the owner gave, maybe the owner didn't, and that has a lot of effect in how you separate trumas u'maisos. Similar to the Mai, I know we have to speak it out. We're going to speak it out at some point, God willing, in some time soon. That when you say that midrabanan, right, Rabbi Yechanan Kohen Gadol, you have to separate again trumas u'maisos from the Mai. It's not the normal separation because there is a suffix. And therefore, anything that's connected only to din of the mamayna, we say hamoitzi mechaveri olavaraya. So the Braisa says no, that if you are separating trumas u'maisos, you the recipient, vadai that the owner did not separate. That's for sure. And there's another important nuance here, and that is when Reuven tells Shimon, gather figs from my tree, and he did not tell him how much. That means the donor doesn't know how much he gathered. So even if the donor would have had a way to separate Trumas or Maasros, he would not know how much to separate. He would not know how much to separate. You know, we learn in Pirkei Avos, al karbe la'aser umados. We don't approximate Maaser. You need to know how much is here, how much you have to separate. So for sure he did not separate. The recipient has to separate. However, if if the gifter, the donor, Reuven, is telling Shimon, gather this basket. It's a 5-ounce basket. He knows you fill up this basket, a gift. Now the owner knows how much the recipient received. But again, the recipient is the one that harvested the figs. So for sure, the normal way of separating Trumas or Maasros by the donor did not happen. So here says the Braisa again, if he's having Arai, no problem, because since there's no Gamar Malachi here, that would mean that if the figs did not enter the house yet, out on the field, like any other produce, you can have a casual, halachically aroi achila. However, if you want to eat a proper meal, now, uma'asran demai. Now there's a doubt. There's a doubt. Maybe the owner did, maybe the owner didn't. So whatever that means, only that type of separation you need to do. Says the Braisa, Ba'med Dvarim Amurim, Ba'am Haaretz, guys, halk up. Ba'am Haaretz means when the donor was an Am Haaretz. That's why the recipient has to view it as Demai. Aval B'chaver, if the donor is a Chaver, Oichel, the recipient can eat, Ve'ein, Sharech La'aser, he doesn't need to do anything. These are the words of Rebbe. Hold on. 1 second, the Gemara is going to explain it in a moment. The donor was not there to separate it from it. Eloma, he must have separated from another place. Like we mentioned in the words of introduction, that if you have 2 piles of product, that they have the same level of obligation, and they have the same quality, then theoretically you could be Kaidim min hayaf ala yafa min hara ala ra, but really it should be min hamukav when they're together. Because if they're separated, then you might think that you're separating from A to B. If you are only by B, maybe A is not in existence. If you are by B, maybe A is not in existence. It's not something that ideally you should. Rebbe holds that he did it. However, for that comes along his father, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Ba'med Dvarim Amurim, right? That we say that the gift of figs is considered demai. That's only Ba'am Haaretz. Aval B'chaver. If the donor was a chaver, punkt fakert, for sure, he did not take off Trumas or Maasros. Since, again, the donor tells the recipient, you pick it off the tree. He wasn't present there. So if it was given from produce that was not together with the produce of the gift. So there's a rule that a chaver will never do that. Says Rebbe that Miroy and Devarai Medivrei Abba. I hear what my father says, and I think that my words trump the words of my father. You know why? Because Mutav Sheyechashdu Chavedim Litrim Shleimen Mukav. I know this is not ideal, Moide, but it's better one level of not ideal. But the recipient might not do anything. A chaver has a greater responsibility. Never to allow any of his produce to leave his property before it's properly tithed. He's giving a gift. What does he think? That the recipient for sure will take off Trumas or Maasros? Maybe he won't. Oh, and a lot more of this in a moment.
Rabbi,
yes.
Is it typical or common for someone to take off Trumas and Maasros from when it's still on the tree?
No. Very good. Yeah, no one took it when it's on the tree. That's not what happened here.
Meaning he's telling him, go to my tree and pick off your fruit. So why would we think that a chaver or an Am Haaretz, who's taken Maasros already?
Okay, so the Gemara is going to analyze in all of the cases if the donor is a chaver, if the donor is an Am Haaretz, if the recipient is a chaver, the Gemara is going to clarify that in a moment. But the vart here is like this, is that if the donor is telling a recipient, pick fruit off my tree, while it's on the tree, even if the donor is the greatest chaver in the world, he's not able to separate anything, it's on the tree. Here, since the recipient is the one that did the picking, the donor was not there, that's why we have a question mark whether Trumas Umaisis was separated or not. If it was separated, you know what that means? It means that after the recipient picked the kalkala, then the donor in another location, that's called Shulaim and Amukov, said that in the Chaver's bowl, here, this is Trumas Umaisis for my gift that I gave to that person. That's the possibility that happened, and that's the machlokes, whether we say he did it or not. Good. So now says the Gemara, what is the machlokes? Ela Demar Savar, which is Rebbe, that nechshadu. No. That we suspect, this is a good suspicion. And again, we said the words in the intro. Rebbe, like the Rebbe, holds that it's better for a person to violate in a Surah Kalila than ever send shluchim to places there's no minyan. Davening without a minyan is in a Surah Kalila. The Rebbe felt it's better for his Hasidim to violate in a Surah Kalila, but that Yid should not intermarry. That Yid should not eat Chazer. That Yid should start keeping Shabbos. Same thing over here. He'll give Shulaim and Amukov because there's something more important to happen. Umar Sovar and his father, right, the Rabban Shimon and Gamliel holds that loy nachshadu. He'll never separate Shulaim and Amukov. Avol kula alma chazaka shliach oiseh shlichusi. Were it permissible? It's amazing. You know, the Gemara is viewing the donor separating of Trumas Umaisris is viewed as an act of shlichus, which makes a lot of sense, because who is mechuyev to separate Trumas Umaisris? The recipient. Truth is, don't eat it, don't separate it. You want to eat it, you got to separate it. So anyone else doing it for him is doing an act of shlichus. It's not the chiyuv of the donor, it's the chiyuv of the eater, of the owner, the eater. And here you see that if not for the challenge that you can't be Tleidim Shulaim and Amukav, everyone would hold that he will do. That's a Gevaldik. So Rav Sheshes has a raya that even B'Shel Torah Chazaka says Rav Nachman, no. Rav Nachman Hassan, Rav Chanina Chuzah. Right? We have the Chayza of Lublin, and then in the Gemara we had Chanina Chayza. Don't Rav Chanina Chayza. Chazaka who al chaver she'einoi moitzi davar she'eina mesukim mitachas yadoi. Not shlichus, not shlichus. If you have product that is obligated for it to be tithed, whether it is midaraisa, whether it is midarabanan, doesn't make a difference. You are obligated, if you're going to give it away, to tithe it before you give it away, and not shlichus. You're not allowed to give away produce if you did not tithe it first. That's why if you would be allowed to do it, if there would not have been the issue of Shulaim and Amukav, then at a Chanami, you would have done it, but it's not connected to Shlichas. I know there's a big talk, just a one Nakuda, that Rav Sheshes is trying to prove Mishal Torah. And this is not so simple, because according to many Rishonim, most Rishonim, tithing figs, Bechlal is only Midrabanan. That's a big topic here that they speak about. So what's Bechlal, the whole Raya? Fakir, the Rishonim that say that you're chayiv midoi raisa to tithe all fruits, one of their rayas is from Edom and Daf Lamed Beis. Okay, now let's analyze this brayse. Now that we took away Rav Shesh's proof. Amar Mar, who knows what's not clear, Danny, you mentioned it, is who is the donor the Amaretz, is the donor the Chaver, there's the Reisha, there's the Seifa, let's clarify this. That we say that the Kalkala is the Mai. That's what we learned before. That's Rebbe's words. So now the Gemara says that Mamish doesn't fit. There's a big problem. Hi, Am Haaretz, Dika Amar Lei, Leman. Okay, the Rebbe is speaking about the donor. That's clear. If the donor was an Am Haaretz, if the donor was a Chaver, but what Rebbe did not mention was who was the recipient, and that's very negeya. So that the donor was an Amaretz and he gave it to Amaretz. So Rebbe says in that case, Ma'asron Demai. What does that mean? Guys, Amaratzim will never separate Trumas to Maisras on Demai. They are the cause of Demai. Who is he talking to? He's telling a recipient and Amaretz, you don't speak to them about the Mai, because the Mai, Ma'asrim the Mai, one detail means that you don't have to take off Truma, because the Amaratzim cared about Truma. But they didn't care that much, let's say, about Ma'aser Ani. So if they don't care about it, it's nonsensical to tell someone who doesn't care about something to do something that when you get something from him, you have to separate the Ma'aser Ani. Ma'asron the Mai mitzayis, will he listen to that? Elot must be that Medvar means that the donor, Rebbe was speaking about the donor. The donor is an Amaretz, but Elomad the Karmelei Lechaver. So the Rebbe tells the Chaver, if you get it from the Amaretz, separated the Mai, it's not going to fit. Why? Look on the next line. Ema Seifa, that when Rebbe says regarding the Machlekes he has with his father, that Neroim Devar Rai Medivrei Abba. And why? Because Mutav Sheyachashdu Chaverim Litroim Shleimen Amukav. Look at the words. If the case of the Braisa is that the donor gave it to a Chaver, is Amaretz my boy Hassan. It mamish doesn't fit. This is Gaval. So Amar Avino, Reisha, Taka we said correct, was with the Amaretz was the donor. Sha'amar means he gave it to. He told the Chaver to pick the figs. So the Amar is the recipient. That he told the has to be that way. And that's why the Braisa is telling him, Rabbi is telling him Demai. However, Seifa, yes, it flips. If the donor is a Chavir, then it must be he gave it to an Amaretz. But here again, if he gave it to Amaretz is not going to listen to what you're telling him. The word of the Amaretz means is that the donor, the Chavir, tells an Amaretz, pick a basket for you of the figs. But you know what happened? There was a Chavir Acher that was there who overheard that statement. So now the question is, this Chaver, if the Chaver is now going to buy the basket off the Amaretz, or if the Amaretz is going to share some of it with the Chaver, to him, the Braisa is addressing Shitas Rebbe. Rebbe Savar Daflam Beis Amid Beis. That Oisa Chaver, the one who overheard, what did he? He overheard a Chaver giving a kalkala to Amaretz, that he can eat it at all. He does not even need to treat it as the mai, because the vadai isure ma'asar chava kama ilavi, that the original chaver, the donor, took it off, because like we learned that there's a chazaka, a chaver will never leave something not tithed when you're giving it to Amaretz. However, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says no, that lo yoichel actually asid, that the other chaver who overheard that gift from the chaver to the Amaretz, he has to take it off vadai. So Amalei Rebbe mutav sheyachashtu chavedim litrem shleimen amukov, but va'al yachilu Amaretz. But what's the solution? Not to be tleidim shleimen amukov. So a chaver is giving to Amaretz. You're not allowed to do that. And by Michael Mifligi, that's the underlying machlekes that Rebbe holds nichalei lechaver. That's the pshat of a chaver. A God-fearing Jew will say that it would be better for me, the liavid who isura kelila. Kelila here it means light. Light means we're not violating. Shleimen Amukav is not a blatant rabbinic violation that we're not allowed to do. I cannot say I'm going to eat meat and chicken cooked together if that's going to prevent you from eating chazar. I'm not allowed to do that. Here, this concept of not giving of trumas u'maiser shleimen amukav, that's called an isura kalila. That here a chaver will take upon himself that violation, as long as this will guarantee that's Rebbe. And I'm showing him Liel Savar. No, nichalei lechaver deliavid am haaretz isura rabba. He went to a different type of, he had a different attitude. Let the Amaretz violate the big Yisr. But me, the Chaver, Afilu, Yisura Kalila, Loili Aved. We definitely, as Lubavitcher, proud Lubavitcher Hasidim, we can mamash understand this machlekes. We have seen this, we have lived it, and va'ashreinu, that we belong to the group of Rebbe. Okay, Chavre, next Mishnah. So as we mentioned in the intro, this is so important. We're starting a fascinating sugya. And there's no rush. Even going slow, it's going to be relatively short dafim, but there are many details. You know, there are many times that you learn a Mishnah, and then the only way that the Mishnah will make sense is if you apply the Mishnah to a very, very, very limiting case. I'm saying very, very, very 3 times because that's what's going to happen here. And that will be a classical case. The Rebbe in the Mishnah writes a very generic statement, which externally makes sense. And then when you analyze it, it will only make sense in a very, very particular case. The Nakuda is that when the Eruv is placed, let's take a step back. First of all, there's something called being Ma'arev Biraglayim. That means if I'm the one that wants to walk beyond the 2,000 amas from my Makom Hashvisa, if I go to the location from where I can both walk back to my house and I can go to my desired location, I don't have to even put any food. But if I don't want to walk there to be there myself with my feet, ben hashmashas, then I can send my food there. And obviously, I would only do it with a shliach, because if I'm putting my food there, I don't have to put food. Just remember that. The whole concept of sending food by default means that I'm not going anywhere. I have a shliach that has, we've learned in the last Mishnah, that has a bardas that's going to put it there with kavana, and it's going to be valid for me. I have to theoretically, I have to have access to that food. When? At the time that it needs to be there. You know when it needs to be there? Not the whole Shabbos. Doesn't have to be there when I'm actually walking beyond my original techum without the Eruv. It has to be there bein hashmashas. Let's leave the word bein hashmashas. Now what happens if it's physically there and it's physically accessible, but halachically it's not accessible? That messes up my Eruv. We have a lot of leniencies, but ultimately if there comes a case where I cannot biblically access it, that means if I were to take it, I would be violating an Isur D'Oraisa, that invalidates the Eruv. Based on that principle, says the Mishnah, if the food of the Eruv was placed on a tree, so if it was above Tvachim, then ein Eruv, then the Eruv will not be valid. Now, just to give a little bit of a tam of foresight of the Gemara, we must be speaking about a tree that has dalid al dalid with, and if it's lamay lama sara, that's your bona fide reshus hayachid. And as we'll clarify, the person was intending to acquire his place at the base of the tree. Okay, so let's make believe you're at the base of the tree. But if your food is l'mayla masara, so for you to take it, even ben hashmashas, you have to make an act of haitzah mireshus hayachid to you. Guys, what I'm saying now will not be the maskana. This is just to have a vague, we have to begin from someplace. That's the pshat. Oh, so I don't care that it's there. I don't care that it wasn't physically locked up in a box. You had access begashmias, but you didn't have halachic access. However, the matam tvachim is either part of your domain, like the Reshus Harabim goes up 10 tvachim. We're going to learn about a caramelist. We're going to do a lot of chazara soon in the Gemara. Bottom line will be, this is a scenario where halachically, at least for ERUVIN, you are allowed to take it, and therefore, ERUV. Sounds simple. Next case in the Mishnah, which is Taka, the Gemara spends a lot less time on the second case, that if the Eruv was placed in a pit, the boyd, here, afilu amik me'ama, right, if the boyd is 4 by 4, then the moment you go 10 tvachim to the other side of the world, it's all one big reshus hayachid, then Eruv. We're going to see a lot of this in the Gemara. None of this is so simple. Right away, you can jump and ask, you made it worse. If I put it in a pit, if the pit is a Reshus HaYachid, and the person's Makom Hashvisa is not in the pit, just like by the case of the tree, he wasn't intending to be on the tree. He's by the base of the tree. So he's by the base of the pit. So you have the same problem. It's from Reshus HaYachid to a Reshus Harabim. By the time we'll get to the boy, hopefully we'll remember so many rules that we'll have the answer automatically. But let's begin with the tree. Okay. Says the Gemara, Yosef, Rab Chia bar Abba, and Ravasi, and Rabba bar Nasim. These 3 Amoraim were sitting. And they were sitting in the presence of Rav Nachman. The Yosef, Rav Nachman Gabayu, and they had the type of relationship that it was not disrespectful for them to harve on their own. Very much like today we're in yeshiva, and the Rosh Yeshiva wants to hear how the Bachram are learning Pshat. And he doesn't want to get involved. He wants the Chevre to learn, to hear how they're learning. And this mission is very difficult to actually figure out, even technically you can say, what exactly is the case. So he's listening to them, and these 3, V'yosvi, V'ka'amri. And they begin to learn the Mishnah, and they begin to ask each other, well, first of all, where is this tree? If the tree is standing in a Rishus HaYachid, that means that again, the person is intending to be koine his shvisa at the base of the tree, Rishus HaYachid, and the Eruv was placed 10 tfachim up or higher. Who cares? I know you're going to ask. Of course we care because you're not allowed to be mishtamish be'ilan. We'll get to all that in a moment. But let's first speak about the transfer of Hitzah, biblical, from a Rishus HaYachid to a Rishus HaRabim. If he's at the base, and Lamaila, and let's say the tree is 4x4, and Lamaila, 10 Tvachim is again a Rishus HaYachid. So Maili Lamaila, Maili Lamata. B'chlal, a Rishus HaYachid, even if the tree is not 4x4, good. A Rishus HaYachid goes up ad l'rakia. So if you're at the base, any part in the tree above you is part of your Rishus HaYachid. They can be. Must be Ella, the tree, the Kohen Rishus HaRabim. Okay, next question. The person who sent the shliach, what was the intent? Where was he planning to be koine shvisa? He intended to take in ben hashmoshes. It's not the whole Shabbos. I'm going to spend ben hashmoshes on that branch. We're going to get to the Isur D'Rabbanan in a moment. But if that's the case, then there's no biblical haitzah who the ERUVIN b'makam. Elot must mean that neschaven lishbois lamata. Oh, and therefore they concluded it must be there's a lot of in between the lines that the Gemara expects us to huddle a little bit. That the tree was 4x4 with 4x4, and therefore 4x4. And if you have mechitzas gevois asara, even like we mentioned, not the mechitzas avir and avir. You're on top. You're on top. That's called a standalone Rishus HaYachid. That's the way it must be that the Eruv is not an Eruv because you can only get it if you violate the Isur of Chaitzah. But we got a problem over here. The problem is, and if it was Lamata Masara, then what? Then the Mishnah says it's an Eruv. If I'm taking in Shabbos at the base of the tree, and now I have to take it off the tree, Hishtamshus be'ilan is a extension of, it's really part of the original Takanas Chachamim, not to climb on a tree on Shabbos, because you might inadvertently violate koitzer by breaking off a branch, and as an extension of that, not only may you not climb up a tree, you may not lean on a tree, and as an extension of that, it's not exeda, it's one long pregnant gezeda. You not only can you not lean on a tree, don't take anything off a tree. Don't use a tree, because if I'm going to make use, placing, removing, I might lean on it. I might break a branch. So any place on the tree, you should have a problem. And this is all, but these three chaverim are speaking amongst each other. Ella, they continue. It must be the Kohen Rishus HaRabim. Yeah, Muzai. And it has to be. And the neschaven lishbois lamata. That we're not going to retract. Another detail is the tree is 4x4, which explains the Lamayla Masara. But it must be that the author of our Mishnah follows Shitas Rebbe, the Amar Kol Davar Shumishum Shvus, like Gazer all of Ben Hashmashes. Yes, Ishtamshus Be'ilan is Isur D'Rabbanan, but since the only time that the Eruv has to be there, and everything that we're speaking about, and this sugya and the sugya and the Aflamed Dalid, whenever it is physical accessibility, it's only for Ben Hashmashes. Actually, after Ben Hashmashes, if an animal ate up the food, you're good. You can use it. It was there when Shabbos came in. Ben Hashmashes, these are the words that Loi Gazru Allah Ben Hashmashes. Now, guys, the Ritva limits this only for ERUVIN. Many other Rishonim say there has to be some sort of tzorech mitzvah. And if you remember, we just learned a few daf ago, our machlokes tanoi t'chlal, whether you can place an eruv l'divrei reshus. So that's going to fit with those who say that to begin with, the whole eruv techumen can only be used if there's a mitzvah reason for you to go somewhere. So there's a mitzvah purpose. For mitzvahs, that's for sure, that legozo l'shot ben hashmoshes. Now, as Atkan, I would say this is not so unusual. Okay, we have many times that the Mishnah makes a simple statement and we have to narrow it down. I want you to know that we're going to learn some of it in this year, some more in the next year. There are many more details that are not covered, and the way I understand is that they also spoke about it amongst each other. The Gemara later is going to be Megala all the other details. And really, they made the Mishnah's case in a very, very specific case. If it won't be in that specific case, then the case of the Mishnah wouldn't make sense. It sounds, so as they're going into all these nuances, you begin to ask yourself, maybe I got it wrong. Is that the meaning of the Mishnah? So Rav Nachman told them, Amal Rav Nachman Yishar, good, you Chavre, you're learning good. And so says Shmuel. And that was a novelty because they were certainly wondering whether they're on the right path. And again, as we'll see, especially continuing the sugya, that there are many other details needed. And for all of that, Rav Nachman had nachas from his Talmidim. And he told them, you guys are learning good. Now, Amar Lei.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Just a quick question in general, before this whole up the tree, down the tree, conceptually, how can I put my ERUVIN in a Rosh Hashanah and establish my living space there? How could it be a living space if it's in the middle of public property?
It's not when I say acquire, there's acquiring in the whole seder of kinyanim. Acquiring simply means that I'm planning to take in Shabbos over there. I'm planning to be there for Shabbos. Now I have reshus to eat in Rosh Hashanah. It's not nice. Chazal said it's like a dog, but sadly we live in a world that it's actually very common. In other words, that koina, to be koina shvisa, for this, it's not mitzad hilchas kinyanim. You don't own anything. It's just fine. Works. You have to get familiar with this concept. It's like a new concept. To be koina your shvisa, since I have food there, I'm taking in Shabbos. Now, if you remember, Chananya, right? Chananya Beishamai, he basically is saying what you're saying. He's just saying it much more. What do you mean you're koina shvisa? Because you have a psat bagel there. If you bring all of what you're going to use for Shabbos, okay, then you're koina shvisa. But one second. They were surprised that Rav Nachman agreed with them. They mamish thought they're on the road. So Amru Lei, they tell Rav Nachman what Posrisu Bakulahai. When you learned the Mishnah, you already limited it so much. So the Gemara doesn't understand. What do you mean? They were doing it themselves. So if they were doing it, and here their Rosh Yeshiva tells them you're doing good, so what they're telling him, is it that much? They themselves were suggesting everything that we said until now, and the stam a lot more. So the Gemara means to say, the Gemara is explaining what they meant to say. They, the three, tells Rav Nachman that did you establish all of this as the correct meaning? Gemara here means the meaning of the Mishnah. Is this are we right? And Amrulay, yeah, in the way you're saying. Many people wonder what's the big thing that we learned until now. I can say one thing. Until now, maybe we don't appreciate it enough, even for learning the way we're learning, and there's a lot of growth that needs to happen. You read a couple of lines, we're going to see so many nuances that it's like, wow, is that what the Rebbe meant? Then you'll appreciate more and more that they were surprised that they got it right. And Itmanami, clear that Omar Rav Nachman, Omar Shmuel, that it must be, even though the Mishnah was so generic, it's limited. No, it's only in this case. And here you're at a clear 4x4. We're going to see a lot of this later. And if it has to be that, because if nischaven lishbois lamayla, so who ve'eruve b'marka me'achad, I don't care if the eruv is in a rishus hayachad. So what? And it must be that since lamata ma'asara, it is good. I ishtamish be'ilan. The Rebbe, all of that was explicitly spoken out by Shmuel. The Amar Kolav Shmuel. Now let's go weiter. Again, I think this weiter was also discussed by them, and it's shocking. Let's at least begin this now, and God willing, we'll continue on the next year. That's not enough. You're telling me that above 10 it's invalid? I don't accept that. If you had in mind to be kind of your shvis at the base of the tree, and the tree can be 4x4 plus, and you can put your 8 of 10 amos plus above, you still don't have for ERUVIN a problem at all. Lo ishanu ella be'ilan ha'oimed chutz le'ibura shalir. Let us start. First of all, when you say that without an ERUV, I can only walk 2,000 amos, that's a correct statement, but you apply it not the way it sounds. It's not like you measure from where you are 2,000 amas in any direction. No. You measure, your location is called your halachic mokayim shvisa. Here in the city, you know where our location is, the whole Los Angeles, that can be as big as the Golos. It's only from outside the city. And more than that, how do you define the end of the city? Where exactly is the end of the city? Where some politician put a line somewhere on a map? Of course not. The end of the city is from the last house. How do you define the last house? So there's something called a pregnant city. Ibura here means pregnant. Mu'beres. What's a pregnant city? That even if 99% of the houses ends at a certain place, and if you have the helicopter view, you'll see the city ends over here. If within 70 amas and 2/3 of an amma, 70 and a 2/3, if within that, even all the way to the edge of that, there's one little hatkela, one little house, that makes that direction of the city called a pregnant city. It's like the stomach that's protruding, and you only begin counting 2,000 amas from that hut. Now, a person is putting an Eruv Techumen because he wants to get from his city A to city C, let's say. He wants to get to another city, and that other city, let's say, is 3,000 amas away. So what will he do? He'll put the Eruv somewhere in between. So says Rava that the whole Mishnah only makes sense that the area in between where he is to where he wants to get, and guys, don't forget, the area in between has to be both within 2,000 halachic amas from where he is and within 2,000 amas from his desired destination. He says that the tree here is not within any city's ibura shalir. But if we're not speaking about the city that he's in. No, we're not speaking about the city that he's getting to. You'll chop why that can be. We're speaking about a case where the in-between area is actually a city. If the tree is within another city's ibur, which means it becomes part of that city, says Rava, Keman demal yadamye, we make believe. How does it work that if something is 70 amas away from the city, it's part of the city? Keilu, we fill up the city all the way until the last hut. We fill it up with earth. It's as if it's one big chunk of an area. And because of us using this image of you fill it up with earth, that brings us the advantage, that you are already standing on a reshus hayachid. Whenever a tree is within a city, just like the whole city is like a daladamas, it's not only that the whole city is a daladamas. It's not only that up until the ibura shalir is all part of the daladamas of the city. It's as if everything is one chunk of it, reshus hayachid. So even though Rashi makes a very important point, let's leave off with this nakuda. Rava is not, God forbid, saying that if you left your eruv at the base, at the branch in a tree 10 tvachim tall, and you are physically at the base, and that tree is within an ibura of a city, Rav is not, God forbid, saying that you can take the eruv to yourself. That's hoitzah. You may not transfer from the reshus hayachid to the reshus harabim. You cannot physically do it. But as far as eruv techumen is concerned, in order to address the issue that we need for the eruv to be halachically accessible, it's ki'ilu, it's halachically accessible. Remember that. Not that Rav is saying is that anything that's within a city is like a reshus hayachid. Of course not. If you are outside the city, you're taka be'ibura shalir, it's out there. If that qualifies as a reshus harabim because it's on a highway with all the 16 amas, ki yotzei Mitzrayim, and there's a tree and you put the eruv 10 tvachim tall, you can't take it down. Of course not. But for the dinim of eruv techumen, we consider it as if the base of the city is on top of this chunk of earth that connects the whole city with the ibura together. And it's ki'ilu, you are standing on a reshus hayachid, and therefore you are ki'ilu. The ERUVIN, you can take the eruv down to you, and we don't care if it's l'mayla miyud. Elama, the tree of the Mishnah is not within an ibura shalir. It's taka out there. Gemara's not done yet. So the Gemara says, whoa, ihachi, chutz li'ibura shalir nami, once you are telling me that Rabbeinu HaKadosh, even though Rava was the one that was megala it, but you are limiting the Mishnah to the teachings of Rava, which means you're telling me that everyone's ascribed to it. It was a given. It needed not yet to be spoken. Everyone knew it. Forget about Tibura Shalir. Even the Amar Rava Hanoisein Eruva Yeshloi Arba Amis, wherever you put your Eruv. If I put my Eruv Taka out there in the desert, in the middle of the highway, and I only have 2,000 Amas from my Eruv, Rava says also, no, don't count from your feet. First, give yourself Dalad Amas. Now there's a big machloikas. Dalad Amas means 2 Amas in each direction of the Eruv. Dalad Amas means 4 Amas, which means really 8 Amas. We're going to speak about that later. But first, you have Dalad Amas. You only start measuring the 2,000 Amas outside the Dalad Amas. The Dalad Amas is like the city with the Ibur. Rav is saying that your Markim Shavisa is viewed as if you are in a Reshus HaYachid for this limit that it has to be accessible. So forget about this trees in a Ibur Shalir. Anytime you put it at the base of a tree, if I am at the base of a tree, I'm at the base, and my Eruv is 10 Tfachim on a branch, we don't view me being in a Reshus HaRabim for this halacha. It's as if these Dalad Amasin, whether it's 4 or 8, right, the box that I'm around is filled with earth, and I'm on top of it. So who cares if it's Lamayla Mi10? Havalei Reshus HaYachid. Reshus HaYachid Oila Ad L'Rokia. Once you're telling me that Rava did not create something new, Rava was just being megalo something, and we are limiting the Mishnah to the rule of Rava. So the tree cannot be in a Ibura. If that's the case, how do you go? The whole tree doesn't. Who cares if it's Lamayla Masaram? So for that, Omar Rabbi Yitzchak bereider Amesharshia Hache Beilen Hanoite Chutz LaArba Amos Askinon. And Daf Lamed Gimel, then Eschav and Lishba is Be'ikare. We're going to stop with this further limitation. It must be that you are spending Shabbos at the base of the tree. But the location on the branch where you're placing your Eruv, whether it is the one that's Lamayla Masara or Lamata Masara, is beyond your 4 Amas. Beyond your 4 Amas. Yes, if it would have been placed within your 4 Amas, even though it's very high up, and you are under Reshus HaRabim, and you may not take it down, the Poel Mamish, you're doing Hoitzam, Reshus HaYachid, Reshus HaRabim, but for the laws of Eruvei Tchumin, we view your Dalad Amas as if you are in a Reshus HaYachid. However, that's only your Dalad Amas. Since the Eruv is beyond Dalad Amas, now let's work through the nuances. We're going to chazer it tomorrow. Hold on, it's not so simple now. Now you begin to appreciate how these 3 Amirayim were shocked when Avnachtum told them Yashir Koyach. They thought they're going on a trip. What are these things? Saying like this. If it's Lamata Miyud, guys, appreciate, if it's Lamata Miyud on a branch, what do we view that? What's Lamata Miyud? What are you going to call that? It's Dalad al Dalad, Lamata, what is that called? It's called a Carmelis. This, he's standing in a Reshus HaRabim. Even for Eruv Tchumen in a Reshus HaRabim, because so what do you need to do? You need to take it down. You need to take it down from the Carmelis to the ground, which is beyond Dalad Amas, and bring it to you. How is that okay? Listen to this. Because from a Carmelis to a Reshus HaRabim, that's only in Nisur D'Rabbanan. That is what the 3 Amoraim were saying, that our Mishnah follows Rebbe that says that it's only a shvus, and Ben Hashmoshes, there's no problem with a shvus. But that's not enough, because even though you can take it from a Carmelis...
Why is that a Rishus? Why is that not a Issa Daraisa? Carmelis is according to Midrash is a Rishus HaYachid. So you take it from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim. That's Issa Daraisa.
For some reason, I have to think they get an answer, Danny, but the Rashi says that it's not an issue. We're going to address this tomorrow. We're going to review this. But it's from Carmelis to Reshus HaRabim. That's step number 1. Step number 2, all down. But if you're putting it down beyond your Dalad Amas, then that's an Isur D'Oraisa. Says Rashi, no, that once it's on the ground, since without the Isur D'Rabbanan, that says don't transport something less and less than 4 Amas. We talk not allowed to do it midrabanan, but midoraisa, as long as you don't do it in one go, you move it a little bit, you move it a little, every Akira Anach is within Daladamas, you vitamin and violate in Isur Daraisa. The only problem will be is only if you start out from a Reshus HaYachid. If it's L'mayla Miyud, taking it L'mayla Miyud to down, that's Reshus HaYachid to Reshus HaRabim. That is why Isur Daraisa, even Ben Hashmoshes you may not do, that is the case of the Mishnah. Now you appreciate what they're saying. So they figured out the Ilin is Reshus HaRabim, and now it can't even be above you. It has to be on a branch that's 4 amos. It's out there. If it's an Isur D'Rabbanan involved, that's when the Eruv is an Eruv. If there's an Isur D'Oraisa involved, that's where the Eruv is not going to be an Eruv. Guys, I lost my connection. I'm coming right back. I want to analyze. I just want to shut my machine over here. This look inside the Rashi about the Carmelis. All right, I just think that now that Chazal...
Okay, Rabbi, what does
less
than 10 Tefachim help us here?
You're wrong. Huh?
What does less than 10 Tefachim help us?
No, less than 10 Tefachim means that... no, okay, I have the answer. Less than 10 Tefachim, Reshus HaRabim goes up until 10 Tefachim.
So if it's in the tree, but below 10 Tefachim, then you call that Reshus HaRabim. That's not...
Biblically.
Okay.
It's a Carmelis. So Midrash, you're taking it from Reshus HaRabim to Reshus HaRabim. No problem. Less than 10 Tefachim. You're not carrying it to Daladamas. Even though Midrabanan is a Carmelis, it's only a Shvus. The only real problem is that when you bring it down, then you have to bring it to you. So that Rashi says, bring it less than Daladamas. If it's L'mayla Ma'asara, now it's Reshus HaYachid. From Reshus HaYachid to Reshus HaRabim, that's a biblical violation.
You're saying that what we call a Carmelis is...
We are calling a Carmelis L'chumra here, because on a biblical level, Reshus HaRabim is Oila Ad Yud Tvachim. So anything within 10 Tvachim is part of the Reshus HaRabim.
But above it?
Above it is if it's Daled al Daled, then it's called Reshus HaYachid, and if not, even biblically, it's called a Makim Ptur. If it wouldn't be Daled al Daled. If it wouldn't be Daled al Daled, then it's a Makim Ptur. Midaraisa U'Midrabanan.
Okay, so what are we saying here in the end?
The thing on the end is that the tree, the case of the Mishnah is that the tree is Reshus HaRabim. And the person did not intend to spend Shabbos on the branch. Had he had that intent, it would have been okay. You're not allowed to spend Shabbos on a branch. Ben Hashmoshes, for ERUVIN, will be just fine. He intended to spend Shabbos at the base. And now we are accepting Rav Shita, that if a person is spending Shabbos at the base, being that the 4 amos is considered his Makim HaShvisa, if he puts the Eruv on a branch, look at that, we would say, as far as Lekula ERUVIN is concerned, the Eruv is valid. Even though he would, like Rashi says, very strongly on Daf Lamed Beis, he's not allowed to take it down. Because he's taking from Reshus HaYachid to Reshus HaRabim, but as far as saying that the Eruv Tchum did not work, it works.
So what's the case in the Mishnah where it says L'mayla Me'asar Tefachim that it's not good?
that branch was more than 4 amas horizontally away from the base, from where he was planning to spend. Guys, if you think we're done, we're just beginning. I'm just giving you guys. Now we'll learn tomorrow. 6:20 will be enough. Let's start 6:20 because it's really small dafim. I'll review this. I'll answer your question because it has to be that it's a Midrash Reshus Harabim. And we're going to have tomorrow more of this, and then we're going to have a basket case. That's going to be like Yehuda Maisoiro. That will go until Daf Lamed Dalet, and then it's easy.
Chazak Baruch.
Yeah, good to know.
Good to know, guys.
Like 6:20.